from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez. Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And our telephone number, if you want to join us by phone, 833-482-5337, 8334-VALDEZ. And today, the IRS whistleblowers took to Capitol Hill to give their testimony as they were investigating the Hunter Biden case and kept hitting roadblocks that they say were being imposed by the higher-ups, protecting Hunter Biden, coming from Attorney General Merrick Garland, where they weren't able to pursue the facts and follow what they were finding on these fact-finding missions. So several people testified. Gary Shapley, one of the IRS whistleblowers. We also have Joe Ziegler. And we have a clip from Joe Ziegler under oath explaining that he felt that the U.S. attorney in Delaware was hamstrung and limited by the Department of Justice officials. Listen to this.
I will also note that while the impression has been conveyed by the U.S. attorney in Delaware that he has similar powers to that of a special counsel in this case, free rein to do as needed, that was not the case. It appeared to me, based on what I experienced, that the U.S. attorney in Delaware in our investigation was constantly hamstrung, limited, and marginalized by DOJ officials as well as other U.S. attorneys. I still think that a special counsel is necessary for this investigation.
Again, that's Joe Ziegler, IRS investigator who's serving as a whistleblower, testifying under oath in front of the House Oversight Committee today. And we have many other clips, but I'm not going to get to all of them right now because I just think it's important that we understand what they were investigating, right? There were millions of dollars that weren't accounted for in his taxes. And some of the expenses that they found were just eye-opening. According to Hunter's own admission in his book, there were hotels that he paid for right across the street from the White House where he stayed and smoked crack and engaged in lots of lurid activity. He paid for a sex club membership and did not pay taxes on that. He was expensing these things, as well as tuition for one of his daughters to go to Columbia University. And again, everybody's got to pay their kids' tuition. The question is, do you expense it and not pay your tax bill? And listen, anybody can make a mistake on their taxes. And I truly believe that. I'm not going to sit here and say that, he did all this on purpose. I don't know. But it does seem like a lot of money, right? It does seem like, I don't know, I think he didn't pay taxes on $3 million. I just can't imagine forgetting I had $3 million. But that is kind of where we're at with that. Now, the testimony continued with Gary Shapley, and Shapley explaining that the red line for him was when U.S. Attorney Weiss told people that he wasn't the deciding person on whether charges would be filed against Hunter, indicating that it was likely going to be someone higher up the food chain, i.e. Merrick Garland. At least that's my inference. Listen to this.
The Justice Department allowed the president's political appointees to weigh in on whether to charge the president's son. After United States Attorney for D.C., Matthew Graves, appointed by President Biden, refused to bring charges in March 2022, I watched United States Attorney Weiss tell a room full of senior FBI and IRS senior leaders on October 7, 2022, that he was not the deciding person on whether charges were filed. That was my red line. I had already seen a pattern of preferential treatment and obstruction. Now, United States Weiss was admitting that what the American people believed based on the Attorney General's sworn statement was false. I can no longer stay silent.
And he's not the only one. Obviously, we've seen many a whistleblower come out of the FBI, many a whistleblower come out of the IRS. And it's clear to me that they are lending themselves to provide cover to Hunter Biden. They're protecting Hunter Biden in a way that you and I wouldn't be protected. Right now, meanwhile, you got some congressmen that are out there saying, no. The reality here is that if it were you and me, we wouldn't even be charged. The only reason they're even charging Hunter Biden and forcing him into a plea deal is because he's the president's son. And they want to be able to continue their narrative that no one is above the law, so therefore Hunter must pay his pound of flesh. Some might believe that, but all you got to do is just think, when was the last time you heard of somebody evading taxes to the tune of millions of dollars and get by without ever facing law enforcement face to face? The whole thing negotiated by his lawyer. Sounds like a sweetheart deal to me, right? I've heard of people getting threatened and losing their homes and things like that just for $100,000 in taxes. So I'm not buying this just yet, not at all, not in the least. Now I want to switch gears to talking about things I'm not buying. Listen to this. We've got a story that I shared with you the other day. Carly Russell. Now, listen, my bleeding heart, shame on me. They duped me. They got me. They pulled the wool over my eyes. She says that she saw a toddler on the side of the road, tried to render aid to the toddler, and then was kidnapped. Now, my very active imagination that doesn't trust anybody as the father of two daughters thinks, the worst. I think the worst. Only to find out that Miss Carly Russell is likely, very likely, in the same league as Jussie Smollett, or as one famous comedian called him, Jussier Smollett. Right? So, very lamentable situation. So sorry to hear that she's a fake, phony fraud. But it seems that the police chief today offered a press conference, and Nick Desden says that Chief Desden says that it's questionable because of her search history.
On July 11th at 7:30 a.m., the term, "You have to pay for an Amber Alert," was searched. On July 13th at 1:03 a.m., the day of her disappearance, the term, "How to take money from a register without being caught," was searched. On July 13th at 2:13 a.m., the day of her disappearance, the term Birmingham bus station was searched. On July 13th, 2:35 a.m., a search for a one-way bus ticket from Birmingham to Nashville was conducted with a departure date of July 13th. On July 13th at 12:10 p.m., a search for the movie Taken, a film about abduction, was conducted. There were two searches related to Amber Alerts on a computer at Carly's place of employment, including one regarding the maximum age of an Amber Alert. There were other searches on Carly's phone that appeared to shed some light on her mindset, but out of respect for her privacy, we will not be releasing the content of those searches at this time. We've asked to interview Carly a second time, but have not been granted that request.
So there you go. Now they don't want to cooperate with authorities. And all I could say is, man, this is horrible to think that we've got these and more. Obviously, more is to come. Another shoe will drop. We're going to find out why she tried to perpetuate this fraud. What was it? Was it really a fraud? Was she under duress? We don't have any of these answers, but it seems like she was concocting a story. For what and for why? It's anybody's guess at this point. What we do know is there was likely no little kid involved here, and this girl's off her rocker and trying to pull a fast one. Can't wait to hear why, so I'm going to keep you updated on that. And speaking of pulling a fast one, the Homeland Security Committee in the House of Representatives issued a scathing report accusing Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas of being intentionally derelict in his duty to the country as he implemented a radical open borders agenda. So we're going to talk to the previous Homeland Security Secretary, Chad Wolf, straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And as I mentioned right before we took the pause, that Republicans on the House Homeland Security Committee issued a report accusing DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas of being intentionally derelict in his duty to the country as he implemented a, quote, radical open borders agenda, end quote. Chairman Mark Green put together this investigation into Mayorkas. And we know that there's been a lot of back and forth on impeaching Mayorkas. And right now there was more than 1.7 million encounters in 2021 and more than 2.4 million encounters in fiscal year 2022. The numbers have been similarly high in fiscal year 2023. But their administration is reporting a drop in May and June. My question to our guest, former Homeland Security Secretary and current Chief Strategy Officer and Executive Director at the America First Policy Institute, Chad Wolf. Is this legit that the numbers are going down? Mr. Secretary, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to be on. Look, I think this is it's an interesting question. The numbers that we see every month are obviously reported on by DHS and Border Patrol. And I think what you've seen over the last couple of months, the administration will say the numbers have gone down. Now, what they're referring to are just Border Patrol numbers. So these are numbers between ports of entry in the desert or on the river or things like that. It's not actually telling the whole story. The whole story is you have to look at all of the different apprehensions where they occur across the border, regardless of whether they're in the desert or at a port of entry or elsewhere. And so if you take the totality of all the encounters, illegal encounters that the Border Patrol and other elements of DHS, the numbers still remain astronomically high, almost 200,000 per month. And that's currently what we're seeing, and it's beyond any number that it should be reasonable. These are numbers that continue to break records. The Biden administration over the last 2 years have had the highest number of illegal apprehensions month after month after month in the history of our country, and it's not even close. So they want you to think that somehow the demand is lower because of the policies they put in place. And I will tell you, and others will tell you, they are simply counting these numbers differently. And I don't think that they're being very transparent with the American people.
So it sounds like political sleight of hand, because I did, took a very cursory look at some of the numbers from CBP, and the total nationwide encounters for June were 211,000, as you aptly noted. Right. And that doesn't seem lower than anything that's previously noted by them. So I'm thinking You're right. They're just saying, I don't know. I go on a diet. Yes, I'm eating less cheeseburgers, and I'm saying, but I'm also eating way more fries. Right. So clearly I'm not, doing anything to change my diet. And I feel like that's exactly what's happening here. How are they getting away with it? Is it the media not doing their job? Is it me not doing enough at my job? How do we get this message out that we're getting had?
Well, I think that's right. So if you look at all of the nationwide encounters and the number that you just said, is they come from two or three different areas that make up that whole number, and only one portion of them is the number that the administration is reporting on. So it's that 144th.
At the port of entry.
In between the ports of entry.
Right.
And so that's the only number, and that's the only number that's actually going down. And so that's the only number the administration wants you to report on, or wants the media to report on, because every other number, including the ones at port of entry, are going up 200%, 300%, 400%, because they're simply funneling these illegal aliens into the ports of entry and paroling them into the American communities. But look, regardless of how they're coming in, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what matters is what happens to individuals who try to cross the border illegally or come into the country illegally. Either we are a country of the rule of law and we return them and repatriate them back to their home countries, or we allow them into American communities. And unfortunately, the latter is happening today, and it continues to happen day after day, week after week, and month after month.
Now, Mr. Secretary Chad Wolf, I want to ask you a question because there's a lot of hype about a film that's out, Sounds of Freedom, and it's a fantastic film. I'm sure I haven't seen it myself, but I have a soft spot for anybody that is fighting the fight against child trafficking and human trafficking. It's a horrible thing, and from what you're seeing, is it safe to presume that the numbers in those types of crimes are going up proportionately, being that the number of total encounters is going up?
Well, absolutely. I think what we see along that southern border, and then you'll have to parse the information and those numbers. But what you're seeing is over the last 28 months, the largest human trafficking of children that we have ever seen. Over 380,000 children have come across that southern border unaccompanied by an adult, a parent, a guardian, or anyone. And so that means they have been trafficked. They have been trafficked by the cartels in numbers that we have never seen before. So absolutely, The Sound of Freedom is a great movie. I've seen it several times. And it's bringing to light that child sex trafficking undercurrent and underbelly that's out there. Now, the movie takes place in Colombia, but it is equally equivalent to what's going on in Central America, Mexico, along the southern border, and unfortunately here in the United States as well. And so it's not something that a lot of people want to talk about. It's a very difficult subject to talk about. So I think the movie does a very good job of tackling that head on.
Yeah, and that's tough to hear, that things are getting worse rather than getting better. I want to continue on this thread here, because there's been some talk, and we'll carry it into the next segment, but there's been some talk about impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas. Some members of Congress have pushed forward in committee with articles of impeachment. Speaker McCarthy said, look, if this is going on and that's going, we may have to do that. But there seems to be a reluctance in moving forward. What can you tell us about that, and how realistic does that seem to you?
Yeah, I think you first have to look at what's going on in the Biden administration. And of course, the border security regime is being put in place by the Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Mayorkas, and his top senior officials. And I think the report that you mentioned that was released today, I testified before Congress twice in the past month. I think just looking at the facts, that you have to say that the crisis that is currently unfolding along that border has been put in place by intentional decisions and unlawful decisions that have been made over the past 2 years. And if that's the case, then some accountability needs to be discussed. And so the question is, should the secretary, what kind of accountability should be there? And I continue to say that he either needs to be fired, removed, or impeached.
Agreed. Folks, we're on with former Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf. He's with the America First Policy Institute. We're going to continue our conversation on illegal immigration straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I am Rich Valdez. Our phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Do you have numbers? I mean, how many have been released without a mandated court date?
So we released a number because of the surge that we experienced before Title 42 came to an end. Now, with the 50% drop in the number of encounters at our southern border, we are executing our consequence regime exactly as planned.
Oh, wow, exactly as planned. That's Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas last month saying everything's going according to plan. We're doing terrific. Things are down by 50%. We know that this is nothing more than political sleight of hand, as the total nationwide encounters are up, at least in June of 2023. They're at 211,000. This is kind of insane, in my opinion. Our guest is former Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf, who is with the America First Policy Institute. And, Mr. Secretary, there's a report coming out of the Department of Justice right now where they're saying that they're assessing the situation along the Texas-Mexico border amid troubling reports over migrant treatment. Is this another horsewhipping fiasco, or do you think there's something to this?
Well, it certainly could be. I haven't seen the report, but again, I think this federal government and this administration should actually be focused on the protection of Americans, and Americans should come first. And having a border security regime, having the Department of Justice, their investigators, actually trying to figure out how to stop the border crisis instead of figuring out what's going wrong, how are we not treating them appropriately, and all this other stuff. So. Look, I think the priorities are misplaced, but we see this time and time again from this administration. They want you to believe that any and every migrant who shows up at that border, whether they have a legal right to be here or not, should be allowed in the United States, regardless of U.S. law. And they want you to focus on that because they don't want you to focus on the results and the consequences of their failed strategy. So again, this is another sleight of hand where they want you to focus on perhaps some actions of a few and try to obfuscate, really the consequences of their failed strategy.
Now, some state governors, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, have taken various actions to try and stem the tide of illegal immigration. And the most recent being Governor Abbott's installation of buoys in the Rio Grande to try to prevent border crossers from crossing illegally. What can you tell us that we may not already have heard? Do you know if it's working? Is there any feedback on that?
Well, yeah. Look, whether it's Governor Abbott, Governor DeSantis, and there are other governors that are providing aid and resources and assistance as well. And I think they've gone frustrated. They've gone frustrated that the federal government won't do its job. It's spent over 2 years basically tearing down every effective border security measure. And unfortunately, the governors are left on the front line to protect their citizens. And so whether it's Texans or Floridians or anyone else, they're starting to take action that they haven't had to take before. And every time you do that, you take action for the first time and do something new for the first time, people are going to complain. And people are going to say, well, you can't do it that way. And that's what's occurring now. And so whether it's the maritime buoys that we see that Governor Abbott is placing, and again, he's trying to deter that illegal behavior coming across that river because he knows that once they come across that river and step foot on American land, that then the asylum system kicks in and that DHS under the Biden administration will never remove these individuals. And so he is trying to take some action on his own using taxpayer dime from the state of Texas to do what the federal government should be doing, which is enforcing border security law.
And while governors are doing everything they can at the state level and within their purview and the power that they have, you've got Democrats working equally as hard at trying to protect Secretary Mayorkas. I know on Friday, Democrats were out there putting out their own report saying that the impeachment inquiry against Mayorkas was really something that was created out of cherry-picked information, and putting this out there so that to deter, I guess, negative reports or any type of critique of the administration and their policies. Do you think that this is an effective strategy, bureaucratically? Do you think it's going to work politically? And C, I guess, do you think it's going to be effective in the media?
Well, no, I don't think that their plan to somehow try to convince the American people that everything is okay at the border is going to work. Look, I think it's probably one of the largest disinformation campaigns that we have seen from the federal government. You just have to look by any objective metric, or anything else, it's failing along the border. And whether it's the illegal apprehension numbers that we've talked about, the fentanyl, the human trafficking, and you go down the line, and the American people know that what's going on the border is not right. They intuitively know that something is wrong and that the Biden administration is responsible for it. So, look, the left can do everything they want to do to try to protect the secretary and say it's not his fault or it's someone else's fault. But the reality is that the laws have not changed since the Trump administration to the Biden administration. The only thing that has changed It's a change in policies and the lack of enforcing immigration law. And that's the result of what we see today. And so you have to ask yourself, who is responsible for that? Is there a dereliction of duty? And do you hold that individual or individuals responsible? And so those are questions that Congress needs to answer. And I think they're doing that. But to have, and I see the Secretary and I see others go on television and try to obfuscate, try to tell, the American people, don't believe your eyes. It's not as bad as what you see and what you hear. And it's just not right. It's a lie, and they're not being transparent.
Yeah, honestly, and I can tell you just, from an anecdotal perspective, I get my coffee from a Cuban exile that is one of the very few Cubans I know that isn't a Republican. And he tells me, I really think that the Democrats are taking advantage of this whole immigration thing because they're assuming that all of these people coming across the border are going to become Democrats. And this is a guy who, he's a big Trump hater, and he just disagrees with me on just about everything. And it's the first time I've heard him admit that this is what's going on. My argument was, I think the government's complicit in running a very large human smuggling operation in one way or another, whether it's tacitly or even unwittingly, but it's happening. He argued it wasn't, but that they were just taking advantage of this politically. But I feel like there's a change in the narrative, even amongst critics.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the change in narrative hasn't come overnight, right? It's because we have individuals like yourself and others who are saying, this isn't right. I'm going to continue to talk about it. I'm going to continue to report on it. I'm going to actually try to tell the truth, and so that the American people can understand what's going on along that southern border and the challenges that we have from a security perspective, from a humanitarian perspective, and then from a legal narcotics perspective, right? When you have over 100,000 deaths and 70,000 deaths from fentanyl overdoses, and largely because of the Mexican cartels are taking extreme advantage of a very porous border, someone needs to be held accountable to that. And I think that's what the American people are saying, and folks on the left are saying, well, maybe we've gone too far. Maybe this open border strategy that we implemented at the beginning of the Biden administration has gotten a little bit out of control. And I think that's why you've seen folks on the left say, well, maybe we should provide some border security, or maybe this has gotten out of control, and we don't know where these individuals are, and we parole them into American communities. There's recent reporting over 500,000, almost 500,000 individuals have been paroled into American communities, and you don't know where they are. They all receive welfare benefits and the like, and so there's some fundamental remaking of the country going on here, and it's out of the public eye, and it's not getting a lot of attention.
Now, we know a good number of them are here in New York City, driving Mayor Eric Adams crazy. But, folks, we're on with former Homeland Security Secretary in the Trump administration, Chad Wolf. And when we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about the work that he's doing at the America First Policy Institute. So don't go anywhere. Stick with us. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Our guest is former acting United States Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. And we have several people with lots of questions for him. Hopefully we can get to a couple of you. Let's go to Gary in Ridgefield, Connecticut, WLAD. Gary, you're on with Secretary Wolf and me, Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hi, Mr. Valdez, and hi, Mr. Wolf. I have a question that I would love to hear somebody ask Mr. Mayorkas, and I think you would have a good sense of it, too. It's very simple. Out of the approximately 2 million people that are coming into our country illegally every year, what percentage would Mr. Mayorkas or you, Mr. Wolf, what percentage would you estimate are people coming here to do our country harm?
Like terrorists and whatnot. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it. Mr. Secretary, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer, and I'll tell you why. Because we're not apprehending everyone crossing that border, right? So of the ones that we are apprehending, and the Border Patrol is actually interviewing, there is a good portion that are public safety threats and national security threats, but there's a number every month, and it's been hovering around 60,000 a month that we call our gotaways. These are individuals that we know cross the border because we have radar feeds and camera feeds that show them, but we don't pick them up because we don't have the assets in that area. And so these are individuals that want to abscond from law enforcement. And so I would classify all 60,000 as individuals that, again, are here for a nefarious reason. So the number that we continue to see along that border that are, I would say, are a threat one way or another to the United States is significant. In the Biden administration alone, over the last 28 months, over 225 known or suspected terrorists have been apprehended at that border. And you just compare that with the 16 in the total in the 4 years of the Trump administration. For all 4 years, 16 known or suspected terrorists. And so the number is startling, and I think the threats are only increasing because of the overall number of illegal apprehensions are increasing as well.
Thank you, Gary. Great question. Now, Secretary Wolf, tell us about the work that you're doing at the America First Policy Institute, because I know that there's quite a bit that you're doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. AFPI is a nonprofit. We have about 135, 145 folks working across about 16 or 17 different policy areas. Obviously, Homeland Security and immigration is a big one for us, but also healthcare and national security and education opportunity and a variety of others. And so we took a lot of the former officials of the Trump administration that were working on some really in-depth policy and tried to take the policies that would have been executed in the second term and move those over into this nonprofit and say, there's a different way to run this country. There's a different way to restore the soul of the country back to policies that made people feel safer, made them more prosperous at the end of the day, and protected more lives. And those are the policies that we continue to write about. And we do that with individuals that ran departments. We have 9 former cabinet officials and over 40 different senior officials. And so we are pushing forth an America First agenda and policies that 70 to 80% of Americans agree with.
Well, keep up the outstanding work. Let everybody know how they can find out what you're doing, how they could follow you on social media, any website you want to put in. Now would be the time.
Yeah, you can follow myself or any of my colleagues at AmericaFirstPolicy.com. Obviously, I'm on Twitter as well as AFPI has a Twitter account. So you can certainly find that as well. But AmericaFirstPolicy.com, you can go there and basically find links to every other social that we use.
Absolutely. Folks, give them a follow. Support the work that they're doing at AFPI. And former Secretary Chad Wolf, I want to thank you for the work you're doing, both at AFPI, the work you've done in the past, and the update that you provided us tonight. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. Thanks for keeping up to speed on everything that's going on.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate being on.
You bet. Godspeed. We'll do it again soon. Folks, there is more to come straight ahead with your calls.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez. We're going to go to your calls right now. Let's go to Tommy in Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Tommy, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez, Mr. Wolf, for this opportunity. Mr. Wolf.
What we actually, the secretary left us, so you're stuck with me, Tommy.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to ask him if the farm worker program was still remaining functional and viable. which has been one version or another since the 1940s. And I know it's awkward because I knew a guy who was in that business. But the other thing is, I am so glad that Vice President Harris finally did get to the border, and we finally found out that Hunter Biden, oh shucks, forgot to pay some taxes. And do we know what Hunter Biden is he actually going to be in court, or we going to actually hear much from the prosecutor? It seems to be the whole narrative has been spun by his defense counsel.
Yeah, well, and the first part of that just to respond, the farm worker program, as I know it, is alive and well. And the second part is Hunter Biden's not going to face anything anywhere. He's accepted a plea, so he's signing off that he's guilty. They're going to issue a sentence, probably with just his attorneys present. They probably won't even require him to show up.
Interesting. If that was me, I think things would be different.
I think it was me, too.
Yeah. And I do want to say that this border issue, I have been familiar with immigration, not an expert, all the way back to the early 1980s with the Reagan administration, Reagan and then, of course, Bush the elder, the amnesty program, and that no president has failed as badly on immigration and the border as Biden. Absolute disaster. Thank you very much. And I'll let some other callers weigh in.
You bet, Tommy. Thank you for your call. I appreciate it. And just to say, I do agree with you. I haven't been around as long as you have, but I can tell you in my lifetime, haven't seen anything this bad, right? And this is the worst I've ever seen it. I know people who are immigrants. Again, the guy that makes my coffee in the morning, this guy came from Cuba on a jet ski from Havana to Key West, and he's the first one telling me, he's like, yeah, nobody's even doing that trip anymore. He says it's easier to go to Mexico and come across the border. And he says they only charge you $4,000 for Cubans to smuggle you in. And he was saying, what's happening right now is horrible. And he also went on to tell me that his opinion, not mine, I don't know anything about that, but he was telling me, he said the absolute worst, he said it's very similar to the Mariel boat lift that happened back in the 80s, where they sent the absolute worst. Like they emptied out jails to put them on that boat lift. And he's telling me that's the same thing that's happening now. People who are the most undesirable, biggest delinquents that you could think of are the ones that are leaving by way of coming through the border and making their way mainly to Miami. And he said, his opinion, that's why crime is so high in Miami. I'll take it with a grain of salt, but it gives you some food for thought. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, the music means I've got to go. So we will get to the rest of your calls a little bit later on. But we continue with our conversations this evening. And up next, we're going to talk about the Biden administration's $39 billion bailout known as student loan forgiveness. You don't want to miss that. Stay tuned. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo, and I'm at Rich Valdez on all of the social media if you want to chime in that way, or you can give us a call and join our late-night national conversation, 833-482-5337, 8334-VALDEZ is our phone number, and Israeli President Herzog was addressing Congress, and he had some very sharp rebukes for some of his critics. We'll get to that a little bit later at the top of the next hour. What I want to talk about now is two things. One, this program, America at Night with Rich Valdez, has been nominated for a People's Choice Award, the podcast version of this program. So I'm going to give you some details on how to vote, because you got to vote by email and you got to register your email. So it's going to require you, the people, to make your choice on if you like this program or not, and you want our program to win. So if you're listening to this, write this down, podcastawards.com. You go in there, put in my name, Rich Valdez, and give us a vote. Again, you got to register your email and click on a little blue box that says vote here. podcastawards.com. I'll talk about it a little bit more in the next hour as well, and I'll also put something out on social media. But you can check it out at podcastawards.com. Now, I'm looking at another article here. Listen to this. Biden's student loan bailout plan to cost $475 billion over the next decade. That's roughly $45 billion more than the rejected plan. And that's according to a study from the Penn Wharton budget model. So this is an interesting turn of events, and obviously a lot of people are upset with this. But from the polling I've seen, a majority of people really don't care. So we're going to have some conversation on that with the Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Jonathan Butcher. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
You bet. You bet. So let's talk about this because, either way you slice it, this $39 billion deal, which, the New York Post and Penn Wharton are saying is going to cost us $475 billion over the next decade. Either way, it sounds like a raw deal for taxpayers. Break it down for us.
Well, look, this whole situation has become a bit of a political theater, right? So the Biden administration proposed from the executive office that with his signature, they could wipe away, student loans for a huge majority of borrowers. And the Supreme Court, of course, stepped in just a few weeks ago and said, no, you've completely overstepped your bounds. You cannot, through executive order, sign away student loans to taxpayers. Because remember, they call this a student loan forgiveness plan, but they're not forgiving anything. They're just shifting the cost from borrowers to taxpayers, right? The people in the middle class and the lower class, and who are, feeding their families and taking care of their, homes and all those kinds of things. And so what's happened now is that along the way, the Biden administration figured out how to use rules, sometimes without even getting, most of the time, without even getting the proper permission that they needed to through the rulemaking process, to sort of carve out different constituencies of borrowers, right? Borrowers who went to for-profit colleges, borrowers who have special needs, borrowers who work in the public sector. And now you have this, it's called an income-driven repayment plan. And what it would do is it would cut the borrower's monthly loan payments. They were formerly capped at 10% of discretionary income. So you couldn't pay any more on your loan than 10% of your discretionary income. Well, they're going to cut that in half. I'll cap it at 5%, okay? And then they're going to take that, and they're going to even say that the time to ultimate, quote, forgiveness or end of the loan would go from 20 years to 10 years. So you're talking about people who would have, in particular, majors that have lower income when they graduate, so lower salary. They may pay nothing over the course of their loan because they would never qualify to, under this plan, for their income to be high enough that they would pay even the interest on the loan. However, graduates who do take out loans and have a higher salary, they would pay significantly more. So really, the whole thing is just showmanship. I mean, the administration is using it to buy votes, and they are really, the most important thing here is that 2/3 of Americans don't have a 4-year bachelor's degree. 2/3, okay? And so you're asking those people to pay the loans of, for the most part, some 50+% of borrowers are those that have loans for graduate school. So potentially future doctors and lawyers.
How do you see this playing out, I guess, politically speaking? Do you think he scores the cheap political points he's trying to score? Or do you think this kind of blows up in his face where people, the 2/3 of Americans that, don't have these loans, say, or it doesn't mean they don't have these loans, but didn't complete college.
Didn't even go to college, right?
Yeah. They turn around and say, I don't want to do it. I don't like it. No thanks. How do you think it plays out?
Well, part of the problem with a plan like this is that rarely do you see the bill, right? I mean, these are loans that are sort of held somewhere by some federal bank, right? And taxpayers won't really recognize what's going on until they get their tax bill, right? So I hope that we can inform American taxpayers that this cost is being shifted to them, right? The cost of students going to college who are taking out federal loans is being shifted to taxpayers, some of whom may have even paid off their loans, right? Some of whom saved up to pay for their kids to go to college. And Washington is now wiping it away. So I hope that we can communicate to Americans that this is a plan that's going to be very expensive for them, and it's a very valid question. Why are we doing this now? Why didn't we do this 2 years ago? And are we going to do this again in 3 years, in 5 years? I mean, how many times are we going to ask taxpayers to just foot the bill, right, for some sort of loan, washing away, right, of all loan debts? And that's not fair to Americans. And I mean, look, there are problems in the higher ed system right now. Tuition is too high at most colleges. Tuition goes up every time Washington makes a commitment like this, saying that they will either carve out certain borrowers or that they're going to pay off loans, what have you. Colleges can then just say, well, I mean, look, we can make tuition go up as high as we want if Washington continues to foot the bill. So, I think for starters, I think we have to communicate to Americans that this is expensive for them. And then secondly, I think that there should continue to be pressure from the courts saying that what Biden is doing is an overreach of executive authority. I mean, he does not have the authority either from the White House or through the Department of Education to make changes like this.
Yeah, excellent point that you bring up. And, interestingly, I worked in higher ed for a couple of years, about 8 years, and I can tell you that I've seen tuition go up. And as an administrator, I realized how difficult it is to run a very small college. And in the Christian higher education space, which is where I was in New York, there's a couple of schools I just recently found out that are shutting down, right? Nyack College in New York is shutting down, as is the King's College, like completely closing because they literally can't increase the tuition enough to stay afloat in this climate, in this part of the country. And I'm thinking, and I've seen this coming for a long time, because ultimately there's but so much raising of tuition you do before you hit the point of diminishing returns and you say, hold on, why am I spending $4 million on a degree I'm never going to make $4 million from? And I think ultimately people say, well, it just doesn't make sense. It's not worth it. I'm not going there. And I think that's happening now. What's your take on the increasing of tuition across the board? How do you see that? It's not. I don't think it's going to go down, but do you see it kind of waning a little bit, where it plateaus, or do we see more college closures?
So I think a couple of things are going to happen simultaneously. I mean, I think for one, there's going to be an increase in the number of new schools that try to open to offer a different experience to students. We've seen the University of Austin down in Texas, which made a big splash as they're about to enroll students here pretty soon. There's a college in North Carolina called Thales Academy that comes from an individual who started a set of classical Christian private schools, who now has moved to the higher ed space and is trying to create a low-cost experience for students. There's a place called Ralston in Savannah, Georgia. So, we're going to start to see, I think, some new institutions open up that are going to try to deliver a different experience, something that is cost-effective, and perhaps most importantly, something that is teaching quality skills to students so that college isn't 4 years of sort of Maoist indoctrination. And this is a real thing here, right? I mean, colleges have struggled to be places where free speech has any place, in the classroom. I think over and over again, we see these headlines of either shout downs or, the latest class that's teaching, some sort of communist propaganda, especially at institutions, large institutions. And now, of course, we have the Supreme Court ruling from the Harvard and UNC cases that found that these colleges were using racial discrimination. They were using racial discrimination in their admissions practices. And there's evidence, there's proof. I mean, what's fascinating about these rulings is that there are actually footnotes in the rulings that quoted from emails among administrators talking about how they used racial preferences when they were considering different student applications. I mean, so I think Americans are losing faith in traditional higher ed institutions. I mean, I think there's even been news about how some federal judges are saying that they're not going to take anybody to come work for them who, just came out of Harvard, Yale, or one of the Ivies anymore, because they know what's being taught there. So I think the pressure of new institutions and parents not wanting to pay $80,000+ a year for their child to go off to school and finding somewhere else, that ultimately is what's going to put incentivize these schools to change their ways. And I think if they don't, I do think, especially now as we see low birth rates and fewer students at this point going off to college, that there's going to be a real crunch here. And I think the schools are either going to have to change on their own, or like you said, as you listed the schools that were starting to close, it's going to be forced on them.
Yeah, excellent point. Folks, I don't want you to go anywhere. We're on with Jonathan Butcher, senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. And we're going to come back and continue this conversation. He also has some interesting thoughts on mental health, the ambiguity of gender, and protecting families and children, which I think is right in line with this conversation. So we're going to do that straight ahead. Plus your calls, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez, our guest, Jonathan Butcher, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. And we're having a conversation on education and children and families. And there's a piece he's got on his Heritage page titled Mental Health, the Ambiguity of Gender and Protecting Families and Children. Jonathan Butcher, walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So some state lawmakers have taken some really key steps to prevent schools from coming between parents and their children. There are some states, California, New Jersey, even New York, where there are policies in place that allow school officials to not tell parents when their children come to school and want to, quote, assume a different gender and use a different pronoun or name. And in response, I think there have been some key leaders, most recently Governor Youngkin in Virginia, who have said that school personnel may not keep a secret from parents when a student is coming to school and wants to, assume a different name or, quote, gender. This is a very key, a very important health decision that a child is making, minor children at very young ages. And so we need parents to be right at the center of this kind of decision making. And school personnel, they absolutely must have parent permission before they address a child by a pronoun that is different than what's on there, that doesn't correspond with their birth certificate. This is called the Given Name Act. There's more information about it on our website at heritage.org. And look, some of the key research behind this idea is that when a student, when a minor, or anyone really decides that they want to live a life that is different from what is on their birth certificate. And again, it's hard to even sort of define what this is, because the concept of gender is so ambiguous. It changes all the time. But for the sake of argument, when they change their quote gender, it does not improve their mental health. Students and young people who are thinking of going by a different gender, a different pronoun, are often at the same time struggling with anxiety, struggling with depression. There are a number of other mental health issues that are happening at the same time. It's very common, right, for them to have these kinds of struggles and try to cope by saying that they were born in the wrong body, right? And they suddenly find themselves going down a very dangerous path that can have consequences that they cannot change later in life.
Yeah, you mentioned New Jersey, and I know I had looked at some of what was coming out of those school boards, and even had local school boards where the parents were very involved, and this got the school boards to pass local ordinances saying that school boards couldn't do that. And now you've got the state of New Jersey and the Attorney General, on behalf of Governor Phil Murphy, suing these local school boards because they've passed their local school rules saying that you do have to notify parents. So it seems like the state is adamant about keeping these decisions extremely private and keeping parents out of the loop where they have no rights, sadly.
Yeah, and that is not the place for schools to be coming in between parents and their children. The trust and the satisfaction level of public schools right now is at some of its lowest points in many, many years. And I think part of it is these actions that are putting school personnel in between parents and their kids. Not to mention the extraordinarily low and declining student test scores in math and reading that we've seen coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah. Folks, Jonathan Butcher is our guest. You could follow him at JM Butcher. He's with the Heritage Foundation. You can go to heritage.org and check out his page. Really good commentary by Jonathan Butcher. Jonathan, I want to thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Thank you.
You bet. Folks, more to come straight ahead. Your calls and more. 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. By the way, are you raising a narcissist? We're going to find out.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, so the question right now is, are toxic parents turning kids into narcissists? Now, we've talked about narcissistic people in the past, and, most of the time we're thinking of adults, right? I think most of the time people are thinking of a man. But narcissists have an inflated sense of their self-importance and need for admiration from others. But to truly understand where narcissistic personality disorder comes from, we have to look at childhood development. Children are most susceptible to the influences on their personality because they are just developing that personality. And obviously, who we surround ourselves with when we are children has an impact on that as well. Obviously, those are our parents. So good or bad, the way our parents treat their children affect that child's personality in adulthood. So, again, the question, how do we become narcissists in childhood? Well, Kim Muench, did I say it right? Muench, excuse me. Kim Muench, she's a parenting coach, and she's also the founder of Real Life Parenting Guide. Kim, welcome.
I am excited to have this conversation with you, Rich. How are you?
Oh, thank you. Me too. Because, again, I don't know if I'm done or not, but I once, many years ago, heard some statistic, might have been from Barna Research Group, that said that the majority of your parenting is done by the age of 6. And what they were referring to was like, major decisions, major outlooks on life, things like that. And they said everything else, kids will have pretty much their own outlook, but the stuff that you're really going to ingrain in them happens by 6 and at the latter end, like by 14. And I don't know how true or not that is, but I think it is somewhat realistic when I look at my own kids who are now 18 and 22. But be that as it may, I'm sure that there's plenty of parenting left, because at 18 and 22, I find myself still doing a lot of parenting. It's just a different type of parenting, right? It's not like, minding your manners and saying please and thank you. It's, bigger issues and thinking through bigger problems. But with this topic of narcissism in childhood, I think it seems to stem from childhood. Tell us more.
Yeah, sure, I will. There's no one parenting technique or parenting behavior that is pegged to raising a narcissist. There are several different things that can influence whether or not your son or daughter grow up into potentially having narcissistic tendencies. One of those things is being raised in a family where competition, they're heavily into competition. The parents are highly competitive and only reward really when their son or daughter is highly achieving or winning. So what happens is, these kids who grow up in this environment know that they are not valued and not loved. The love comes to them conditionally. They've got to be winning. They've got to be doing well, either academically or in sports or whatever it is that the parent is competitive with. That is one way that kids will grow into like a narcissistic tendency. They just aren't stably loved. They know that in order to receive love and acceptance from their parents, they have to be at the top of the game. They have to be the center of attention.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack there. But it sounds like a lot of families that are, really focused on sports and people that are really like, hey, come on, let's go and win. And I realize that there's probably a lot of parents out there that want their kids to win. And, they're saying things like, listen, come on, you shouldn't get a participation trophy just for playing the game. It does matter whether you win or lose. And I think all those things are real. But from what I'm gathering from you, it seems like if there's too much of an emphasis on competition, that the child loses out and could end up becoming a narcissist.
Yes. In all of the examples that I'll give you, and I'll give you a couple more of, different parenting behaviors that can lead to narcissism, really the idea here is extremes. So yes, we want our kids to be in sports, and there's all sorts of, good reasons, healthy competition. There's nothing wrong with that. It's extreme. It's when, really the parent is so focused on winning, and they really only show their affection and acceptance to their children when they are winning. That's the problem. That's the issue.
Right. So then the child feels kind of like it's performance-based love or performance-based affection. And what causes that? Because, I've had plenty of jobs like that. I don't know if those have ever turned me into a narcissist. But what does it for a kid when do they feel unloved if they don't achieve? And is that what causes them to focus on the narcissism later?
Yes. Really the parent probably is somewhat of a narcissist to themselves, right? Because they are, again, it's all about them. And we know that narcissists have that inflated sense of self-importance and need for admiration from others. So they want their kids to be focused or to be the ones focused on as well. And another way that we can, talk about this parenting behavior that could lead to raising a narcissist is when the parent has narcissistic tendencies themselves and doesn't value the child or puts them down, like a highly critical parent. Because what happens is the kids grow up feeling like inadequate and humiliated. They don't know. It's like walking on eggshells, right? They don't know when their parent may turn on them and criticize or devalue them. So growing up in that kind of environment, they then turn into an adult that wants to prove themselves not only to this parent that criticizes them constantly, but to the world in general. So they're looking for that attention, and they have that inflated sense of self-importance because they're trying to prove themselves.
So how do you go about fixing something like that? Or I guess I'll leave that. We'll come right back to that. But I'm thinking if someone comes to you, for example, and says, "Hey, I don't know, this was my story. My dad was super focused on me excelling in sports, or my mom, was a tyrant when it came to softball," or whatever the case is. I guess what advice could you give the parents that are listening? And don't answer just yet. I want to give the phone number out in case they have a question for you. 833-482-5337 is our number, 833-4-VALDEZ. And when we come back, the response to how you go about rectifying a situation where you have narcissistic parents raising narcissistic kids. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're on with Kim Muench. She is a certified parenting coach and the founder of Real Life Parenting Guide. And Kim, I want you to pick up where we left off, which was your thoughts on how to rectify the situation when you have a parent that raises a child in such form, and then the child is subsequently a narcissist.
I don't think there's an easy answer for this question, Rich, because narcissists in general, or people who have those tendencies to have this self-inflated sense of importance, have a very difficult time looking within themselves. They have a very difficult time, being self-reflective and wanting to make changes. They are generally people who don't think they have a problem. Now, I coach parents who come to me at times who grew up in situations where their parents were and still are, very narcissistic. And it does definitely make an impact on a child and or an adult, right? So when those parents come to me and they've had this kind of background with a parent, I tell them there's one book that I recommend all the time that is excellent. And if you're okay with it, I'd love to share the title here.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so it's called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson. And it's therapist recommended. It is written by a therapist, and it does an excellent job of explaining to people how they grew up in this environment. Because when you grow up with a parent who is who feels that they need a sense of themselves, and they're like, the kids in these situations generally cater to the parent because it's all about the parent. Like it just totally is about the parent and what they want. And they're looking for love and acceptance. And sometimes in order to do that, they have to be highly competitive, as we talked about before the break. Or sometimes it can be a situation, if you think of like a pageant mom may put her daughter in the spotlight and heap praise on this child who may have some talent, but the mother really heaps it on in order because she has a sense of herself identified in that child, like she's too attached to this kid, and puts them on a pedestal, and they have to stay this perfect child because of that. And I know I'm getting off track here a little bit, but like I said, I think one of the problems is if you have a narcissistic parent, they generally do not have the ability or desire to look within themselves. That's part of the problem. But if they grow up in that situation and they start to feel as if they might, have those tendencies, the books they can read is this Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, because it really speaks to what it's like to grow up with an emotionally immature parent, because in a sense, narcissism is, a parent who cannot self-reflect and look at and maybe acknowledge where they did something wrong or could have done something better as a parent, can cause obviously a lot of damage on a child.
So in a situation like that, what besides the book, how do you advise people to proceed with their lives?
Well, fortunately, people who come to me for coaching, for example, they are willing. They have the courage to work on their parenting. I probably, again, without having any ability to self-reflect or empathy for their kids, narcissistic parents aren't going to work on themselves. They don't think they have a problem.
Right. So presuming, whether the parent is a narcissist or an addict that can't fix themselves, what is it that you do with the children? How do you help them to get to a better place?
Well, I think that what you can do is teach them empathy, teach them the ability to work on oneself, right? Self-reflect. And it's hard if their primary caregiver is someone who has these tendencies. It can be very difficult. And a lot of times there may be a spouse or a co-parent who isn't narcissistic, right? Both parents generally are not having this self-inflated tendency. One may have some, the other one may be more extreme in their narcissism, but a lot of times there's one spouse that doesn't have this tendency at all, and those parents do have empathy. And even if there's one of the two parents that has more ability to self-reflect and has more empathy, that parent will generally, hopefully, have healthier relationships with their kids. And kids are going to learn from both parents. If they've got a narcissistic parent and they've got a parent that doesn't have those tendencies, they are going to learn from both parents.
Now, let's presume the parents are dead, and you have just these kids that grew up with these self-absorbed parents that were narcissistic or had narcissistic tendencies. Are they screwed? Is there hope for people like that based on your experience, or what do they do?
Both parents are narcissistic and they're dead? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, sure.
If they grew up with narcissistic parents, both of them, I don't know that I would say they're screwed, but unless they have the desire to grow and change because of maybe their marriage situation or their situation, or not wanting to carry on a generational pattern of lack of empathy and lack of self-reflection, then they probably are screwed.
Yeah.
If they have to, you have to have this adult that you're talking about would have to have a desire to heal and change the pattern of what they grew up in.
Well, let's go there. Do you find that most people, whether it's narcissism or anything else that you deal with in your coaching practice, are looking for improvement, or do most people say, no, my life is fantastic, I've got it all together, I'm not really interested?
No, the parents that I coach, and I coach parents of 18 to 25-year-olds specifically, the parents that I coach have now gotten to a place with their young adults where their young adult is being very clear with them at times where they messed up as a parent. And the parents that come to me want to do better because they realize that they maybe didn't look at their own childhood and see how that was affecting their parenting earlier in their life. And here now they're looking at, their young adult, maybe, crossing them out of their lives if they don't get some help for the way that they were parenting.
Let everybody know how they can locate you, follow you, and see what type of work that you're doing.
Yeah, so I do a lot of work on TikTok. I have a big following there at Kim Muench Parent Coach, Instagram as well, and my website is reallifeparentguide.com.
Outstanding. Well, Kim Muench, thank you for enlightening me. I definitely did not know any of this stuff, and very interesting to know that this is out there. And hopefully I'll be more empathetic when I'm dealing with people, not only my own kids, but any people, realizing that that's a thing, right? Because I'd learned a little bit about narcissism with a previous guest, but never on how it affects their children, right? So this is a really interesting kind of follow-up to that. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Rich, it was good talking to you. Thank you.
Likewise. Take care. All right, folks, there's more to come straight ahead with your calls and more. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, to the phones we go. But first, I have to remind you about the 18th Annual People's Choice Podcast Awards. This program, Rich Valdez, America at Night, has been nominated for our coverage of government and organizations. And it's up to you guys, since this is the People's Choice Podcast Awards, it's up to you all, the listeners, to actually take, I don't know how long this takes, 10 minutes, maybe 9 minutes, whatever it is, to register your email and your husband's email and your sister's email, everybody who wants to vote in your household. Each of you will get a vote. And to register your family's email addresses and at this website, podcastawards.com, podcast awards, that's plural, podcastawards.com, and click on the blue button that says nominations voting now open. Click here to vote. And that's it. So podcastawards.com, click on the little blue box that says click here to vote and vote for Rich Valdez. You can just put my name right in there. Anyway, quickly, within the time that we have left, let us go to, the music came in. Well, you know what? Hold on. We'll get to your calls momentarily. It is Open Phone America starting in just a few minutes. So you can start calling in now. We're going to get to your calls on all of our topics. I realize some people are on hold and I want to get to you, but the music is unfair. We will be right back. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. It's just getting started. Open Phone America starts right now. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo, and our phone number if you want to join our late-night national town hall conversation, feel free to do it. It's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And we've had some interesting conversations tonight on the IRS whistleblowers. We're going to continue with that. The mystery whistleblower was revealed today as he gave his testimony. We also had some conversation on Biden's student loan bailout and what that means for Americans. And, of course, we talked about the crisis at the border, as well as what it's like to have narcissistic parents, or what the effects of narcissistic parenting on the child of said narcissistic parent. And children of narcissistic parents can suffer pretty long-lasting effects in their adulthood, which is going to affect their self-esteem, their mental health, their susceptibility to be traumatized again, as well as their emotional regulation, or what's known as emotional dysregulation, which is a common symptom for ADHD people like me. That's why we fly off the handle. But a researcher specializing in narcissism says that, these kids can reparent themselves if they were the child of a narcissistic parent. Now, our last guest said that this is very difficult, and you would have to rely on the main parent. The idea is to kind of work through it with the parents, is what I was gathering from the last guest who specialized in helping parents to become better so they could help their children. But very fascinating topic, and one that I don't know anything about, but I'm really interested in learning more about, because as I'm getting older, I'm realizing there's a lot of things I don't know about, obviously, and it's good to know these things, right? You get a perspective that you didn't quite have before. So I want to get your calls on this and anything else. Of course, the woman who said she saw a toddler on the side of the road, we're going to get to that. The police chief very gently ripped her a new one in a press conference today, all but saying she's a liar. That's my take, not his, but we'll get to that momentarily. Let's go to Frisco, Texas, KSCS, and check in with Kristen. Kristen, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
I find it intriguing that you guys are talking about what you are. Are you there?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I was raised by a narcissistic parent. I didn't realize that she was narcissistic until my adult years. She let my brother and I go into foster care and chose her relationship with her husband over my brother and I. And that was when I was 11. And it took me many years of moving on without a relationship with her and then coming back to it and constantly being hurt by her. And then eventually I learned that I can forgive her and keep distance. And that doesn't mean I don't forgive her and move on. But now I'm co-parenting with a narcissistic parent with my older two girls. And so I've had it from all angles. And it's challenging. It's really, really challenging. And it makes life difficult. And I realize that I have a lot of healing to do myself. And I have 5 children. I love being a mom. And self-reflection is vital, what she was saying. And I feel like because of me being put away by my mom and not raised by her, the good I see in that is that I'm less like her, and I can see the things that she did that damaged me that I don't want to do to my children. But I think you can overcorrect. That's one thing that I have found in parenting, is that you can overcorrect the problem too. I can give my kids things that I didn't have, and they don't see the value in it the way I do. And I've made it a point to give my kids everything that I didn't have, putting my dreams on hold.
Now, when you're giving your kids everything you didn't have, are you giving them things like material items or hugs and kisses and affection that you may have missed out on?
I think love, and I think coddling, like not wanting them to hurt or feel sad, or just trying to carry them so much that it can make them a little insensitive.
Yeah, overprotection.
Because I didn't understand that for a long time. I was like, why does my daughter kind of bully me? And I had to learn that, it's okay for them to go through hard times. It's okay for them to endure sadness. It's good for them. That's what builds character. But, obviously I'm not to inflict it, but when it happens in the outer part of our home, just teach them how to go through it and carry through. But not be so like, oh my gosh, what can I do to make you feel better? And
right.
over parenting. And it took me, I have my oldest is 17 and my youngest is 20 months. And so I have them spread out. So I have time to learn still, and I'm still learning and re-gearing. And I realize I'm 37 and I'm still healing and I'm trying to parent at the same time. And I just learning that my mom was narcissistic. I'm like, okay, I know what steps I need to take now. And I think this was the most peaceful time this last time that I cut her off out of my life. Was probably the most peaceful one. I'm like, I need to move on without her. And I had mourned her so many times in my life that it was easy this time because I knew it wasn't me, it was her. And the things that she would say that would tear me down were reflecting her and not me. I think it's super cool that you're touching on this topic because a lot of people don't know what narcissism is. And maybe people that are narcissistic might look at themselves and want to reflect and hopefully catch on.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. I want to thank Kristen for her phone call. The deep state is at it again with my microphone on the fritz, but that won't stop us. Again, welcome back. I am Rich Valdez. Our phone number, 833-482-5337. Let us continue. We had a call from, let's see, where were we going with this? We were going to caller number, hold on, right here. I had my finger on it. Bear with me. Chuck, Greenwood, South Carolina, WCRS. Go right ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say that being a narcissist is not necessarily caused by some form of being ill-raised. It's just a state of being. You can be a narcissist just because that's what you are. And
I see, Chuck. So you're basing this on your infinite wisdom as I guess, a PhD in narcissism. Okay, well, thank you for your call. I do appreciate it. Let us continue. Let's go to Jane, Saratoga, New York, WTBJ. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, how are you?
I am wonderful.
Good. Yes, you are, and congratulations, by the way. Oh,
thank you.
Good for you. You deserve that, believe me. You put up with us.
You're the best.
I mean, way up north, when I've mentioned before, I used to be an abuse counselor. But my daughter she was very independent, and she could have an attitude. And so we would have an agreement. Okay, you're going to probably go to timeout if you're acting up. And I said, you have a right to sit down and talk to me about why you're acting the way you are. So one day we did that, and she said, Mommy, could I have the floor now? I said, yeah, it's okay. What's going on? She said, I have to mention, you have been extremely grouchy today. So when I go to timeout, may I put you in timeout also? And I said, you know what? Yes, you can. And I apologize. And she had.
Well, and then Jane, I know that you have a lot of experience with this, but I can tell you, my children have brought this theory to me many times, where they're like, "Why is it that you're the only one allowed to tell us what to do?" And I was like, "Well, because I'm the parent." And they were like, "Well, that's not fair." And I said, "Well, that's the way the cookie crumbles." I've never really accepted that. Are you suggesting it is a good idea to allow to be on an equal playing field with the child as opposed to being in charge?
Not equal playing field. You're always the parent. But, yes, a child has certain rights, and they do have a right to express themselves. And I think we as parents have to encourage that so that outside influence doesn't affect them. Because if you shut them up too often, they're going to turn to some other avenue, and you don't want that. So you have to. I know my daughter had one friend who came to me when they were in the 4th grade, and he said, my daddy yelled at me last night because I love my baby doll. And he said, I would love to look like her. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. I said, the next time you come over, do you want to bring your baby doll with you? And the kids started to support each other from elementary school on. 14 is way too late to start. And they would get together most afternoons and have a huge jam session. And there was one little girl whose parents were so narcissistic, and she never got any attention. And she would always have to be all dressed up. So the kids would have her come to the house. They would eat. We kept a pair of shorts for her so she could play and have fun. And then the kids would sit down and have a big jam session and talk to each other about their problems. And it was amazing how much the kids could accomplish. And, it's really neat. If you encourage them to talk and be themselves, then you can have a friend sitting there and saying, geez, my parents did that too, or another one says, well, come to my house. And they always knew they had a safe place, and I think we need to give that. Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, well, I'll give it a shot. I will give it a shot. Don't overcorrect your kids. I'll try it. I don't know that I overcorrect my kids or not. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're the biggest critics of my parenting, but I tend to think I'm great. Maybe I'm a narcissist. Jane, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. Let's continue. Let's go to Robert, South Carolina, WTMA. Charleston, go right ahead.
Yes, sir. I just want to say, Rich, that I think that second man that you spoke with just briefly, I think what he was really trying to get at was the difference between nature versus nurture. And you can see that in some cases you have a child who grows up wonderfully, even though his parents were a disaster area. And then you have another child whose parents were a disaster area, but he grows up wonderful. And I was thinking, somebody that a parenting pair that we all know about, the Bidens, look at the difference between their two sons. It's the difference between day and night.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I think it has also to do with there was some early trauma in their family where they lost their mom initially, where I think the oldest Biden, Beau Biden, he was able to spend more time with his biological mother, and I think that stuff does ultimately take a toll and play an impact. But again, I'm not Dr. Phil, but it's an interesting point nonetheless, Robert. Thank you for the call, and big shout out to everybody on WTMA in South Carolina. I appreciate that. Let's continue with our conversations here. Let's see. I want to get into the other topic of the woman, Carly Russell, who said she saw a kid on the side of the road and decided to go and rescue him. But we're going to do that right after this pause. So before we get there, let's go to Thomas in Burlington, Vermont on WVMT. Thomas, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yes, it's very one of the big issues was the accusations against President Trump. He was narcissistic because he had achievement, and there's a lot of achievement that people can acquire, and if you go to the Merriam-Webster unabridged.com and go into narcissistic, you can't just apply it to parents, because everybody is a potential parent, even a 14-year-old. But I think it's easy to misrepresent it, and
you're saying people are being flippant in their use of the term narcissist or narcissistic.
Yes, I think you can search it out, because obviously at 14 I didn't think my parents knew very much, but they did.
Right.
They did pay for leadership in a schoolhouse, and that school teacher should send you home and say, listen, your parents are. You go home and make life easier for your parents, because they're paying the bill. And we're not getting the leadership message that the bill.
Right. We're not getting our money's worth in the schoolhouse anymore like we used to. I get it, Thomas. I appreciate the call from Burlington, Vermont. And quickly, before the music creeps in, let's go to Dan in Flagstaff, Arizona, listening on Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. Dan, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, it's a pleasure. I just want to say it's a little off the topic, but I just want people to think about President Trump, how much. I heard he lost $1 billion his first 4 years. It's about $600,000 a day, and still ran for re-election. So, he's a narcissist. He's a liar. I was in the Navy. There's a lot of sailors that tell stories. He dyes his skin orange. All that stuff's irrelevant. You look back at all your good teachers. All your teachers that you really didn't, hated, they were good. They made you do your homework. That's why you hated them. So the guy gets the job done. That's the bottom line. But follow the money. That's what they say. Follow the money, right?
Yeah.
The guy's losing $600,000 a day. Forget politics for a minute, America. He's losing $600,000 and runs for re-election. He loves the country.
I think you're 100% right, Dan. I appreciate it. Dan in Flagstaff, Arizona, listening online. Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. Make sure you check that out. And, folks, we're coming right back to you and your calls. I am Rich Valdez, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't move a muscle. Coming right back.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
She told detectives the male had orange hair with a big bald spot on the back. She said she was able to escape the 18-wheeler and fled on foot, only to be captured again and then was put in a car. She claimed she was then blindfolded but was not tied up because the captor said they did not want to leave impressions on her wrists. She said that they took her into a house and made her get undressed. She believes they took pictures of her, but she does not remember them having any physical or sexual contact. She stated the next day she woke up and was fed cheese crackers by the female. She said the woman also played with her hair, but could not remember anything else. At some point, she was put back in a vehicle she claims was able to escape while it was in the West Hoover area. She told detectives she ran through lots of woods until she came out near her residence. During this interview, detectives noted that Carly had a small injury to her lip, and she claimed that her head was hurting. She also had a tear in her shirt. Detectives also noted that she had $107 cash in her right sock. Out of respect for Carly and her family, detectives did not press for additional information in this interview and made plans to speak with her in detail after giving her time to rest. Detectives continue analyzing data from Carly's cell phone that was left behind at the scene. We enlisted the help of the United States Secret Service in conducting this analysis. Part of what data includes several internet searches in the days leading up to her disappearance that I think are very relevant to this case.
That is Police Chief Nick Derzis. Now, he is the chief of police there in Alabama. And part of what's going on here is after working with the Secret Service, they connected with the facts, right? And now that they know exactly what's going on, it's interesting because what they're finding out is that she had all these crazy searches, like, how to get away with your own abduction, like the movie Taken, and not that Taken's about that, but it's about an abduction, as well as, how to steal money from a cash register, bus tickets that she was looking to arrange and schedule on this day. Fascinating, just fascinating, the stuff that they found, as if she doesn't watch the news and saw that the guy who killed his wife got caught for doing the same exact thing. So this is an absolute crazy town story, and we're going to get to your calls momentarily. I see we got calls from Hawaii. That's pretty cool, as well as Michigan and North Carolina. We're going to start with Kim in Michigan because I know she had a comment on Carly Russell, who apparently is doing double duty as a stunt double for Jussie Smollett, faking her own kidnapping and attack. Go right ahead, Kim.
Thanks, Rich. I called about that, and I'd like to please talk about the border numbers and stuff. But with this Carly, I didn't know right away that it was a fake. I thought, well, it could be real, but it turns out she stole from her business all those things that sheriff was saying. Right before she walked out the door, she stuffed at the spa business, a bathrobe and something else, and she.
I understand toilet paper. I think she took toilet paper with her.
Yeah, and she's another Jussie Smollett, and she's blaming a white person, and I'm so sick of it because
I don't know if the person was white, but I guess we can make that presumption when she said that the man had orange hair, and I thought, orange hair? What's going on here? What is she going to try and blame this on Trump? This is just absolutely crazy. You're right. Just crazy story, Kim.
And the other thing I wanted to say, there's a reason behind Biden's illegal numbers supposedly dropping. They're not. I heard on my War Room show that a number of months ago, Mayorkas and Biden set up pre-registration sites in Mexico, and illegals use their cell phones. They find out where these sign-up places are, and they sign up, they get a ticket, and then head on to the border. And once they hit the border, I guess they turn this ticket in, this pre-authorization.
Yeah, what's the CBP One app, and they do it right from their smartphone. So they go right to the port of entry, and they don't have to come from those places in between. And that's exactly why the numbers look like they're down. It's because they're coming right through the port of entry, not from between the ports of entry. And like we talked about, it's like a political shell game. It's all sleight of hand, and it's a real shame. But thank you, Kim. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody in Michigan, and thank you for listening on KDKA. KDKA is Pittsburgh's radio station, and it is the oldest radio station in the United States. Now, what's pretty cool about KDKA is they had their ratings out recently, and America at Night was the #1 show on the whole radio station. So thank you to everybody in Pittsburgh and everybody listening on KDKA, because that was really cool to see. I think we scored a 15 share or a 16 share the last couple of months. So kudos to all of you. Thank you very much. I'm honored. And I want to go to Roger in Honolulu, Hawaii, listening on KHKA. Roger, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, aloha.
Aloha.
Listen, I just want to break it up. Nothing serious, but
that's fine.
Well, you're that woman. She's great, and she says, "Well, America at Night." And listen,
right.
Waikiki doesn't sleep. Okay, man.
You're trying to give New York a little competition, Roger?
Well, no, I'm not saying that. But we're 24/7 out here because we have people flying in all hours And if you look at Waikiki, you see all the lights on there. So, people are showing up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So we never sleep out here, mate.
Well,
So,
let me tell you something, Roger. I'll agree with you on this one because I can tell you, I just saw a report that came out that said that people are going out earlier and earlier, and including in New York. I've been to places in New York that I think the last call for alcohol at most bars is, I think it's 4 a.m. or 3:45 in most places in New York. Might even go to 5 a.m. in some spots, honestly. And I haven't seen that happen in forever. And I don't think it's just because of me not doing it. I don't think anybody's doing it. I don't think New York ever really rebounded after the COVID-19 lockdown. So I think a lot of people might go out for dinner. They do happy hour. And I think by 10, 11, midnight, even on a weekend, they're calling it a night pretty early. So, yeah, maybe Waikiki is giving some competition to the city that never sleeps. I don't know. You might be onto something, Roger.
coming in here. Yeah. So anyways, I just called to break up the seriousness.
I appreciate that.
Well, yeah, because you're a stud, and I listened to your program, and like I told the bloke that was screening the calls, I said, no, I just want to talk to him and tell him that, hey, you're not the only one to stay up all night.
Listen, I'm grateful.
Too. Yeah, and I listened to you. I told him, I says, after the San Francisco Giants or the San Francisco 49ers games, you come on, and it's great. All right, dude.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate your kind words. Thanks for listening. Keep it coming. Call us anytime. Roger in Honolulu, Hawaii on KHKA. Thanks again, brother. Always good to hear from you. Folks, the rest of your calls and more when we return.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Jason Aldean's new song, Try That in a Small Town, is getting a lot of heat, right? It's called Try That in a Small Town. It's take two. It's topping the charts. Some people are saying it's a pro-lynching song. I didn't hear any of that when I was listening to it, but again, I haven't listened to the whole thing. But I will say, it seems like anytime you stand up for America or you say something like, fool around and find out, people take that the wrong way and everybody's up in arms. But nobody's up in arms when they're coming after your kids saying, hey, do you want to be a boy or a girl? Hey, did you know you can change your gender? Hey, you can do that. It's funny how they can attack us, but we can never attack them. It's always wrong to be a conservative. It's wrong to be a Christian. It's wrong to have deeply held religious beliefs. That makes you an extremist. That makes you a fanatic. It makes you all sorts of crazy, right? Yeah, MAGA extremist. And but everything else that the left does, like canceling a singer, saying that they don't want you, trying to kick you off Spotify, trying to kick you off iTunes or anything else, making sure my microphone doesn't work for one segment, whatever it is that they're doing, that's always okay. And I think Americans are smarter than that. They know that it doesn't work that way, right? You don't get to get bullied by people that disagree with you. It just doesn't work that way. Anyway, let's go to Matt, Eastern North Carolina, WTKF. Go right ahead.
Well, Rich, how appropriate that was for the beginning of my call. Are you with me?
Yes, sir, 100%.
I know your microphone messed up earlier.
Oh, yeah.
It's all
Yeah,
right.
that's the deep state. That's Joe Biden and his friends.
Yeah, I figured that. They're probably going to come after me, too. But anyway, I'm not even a country music fan. I was telling you, Art, your call screener.
Yes, good man,
I'm not
Art.
even country music. Yes, he is. But it's a beautiful song.
It is. It's a beautiful song. It really does encompass everything. It says everything. It tells the message, of what people really stand for. And there's been a massive emasculation in this country where they don't want men to be men, And it started years ago. I remember my dad loved watching Archie Bunker. I don't know if you've watched Archie Bunker over the years, but All in the Family with Carol O'Connor. And again, the beginning of the song was, back when girls were girls and men were men. Right? That's part of the intro song. And it's funny how this is a show from the 70s that was traditional in its values back then. Now, of course, he made a lot of racial jokes against his black neighbor, George Jefferson. And that was the spinoff to the show The Jeffersons, which we loved in our household. We loved the show. It was great. But my point was that was a real depiction of the times. And it was funny, and I think it was done in love and in jest. Because they were always very friendly. It was like a rivalry, but it was art imitating life. But it was real. And back then, girls were girls and men were men. And people were expected men to be men. And it seems like somehow now men are expected to be girls, right? Or men are expected to not be men. And when you are, they label you with toxic masculinity. And if you're Jason Aldean saying, hey, don't try that in my small town, you won't get far, they want to say that you're trying to lynch somebody. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous to make those types of suggestions. Matt, just to go on a little bit of a tangent here. Earlier today, I was looking at my Instagram account, just seeing the stories that the algorithms put in for you. And I saw a video of a woman making like a bunch of kissy sounds. And she said, that's what it's like to date a Hispanic man. And I thought, that's funny. And then she, abruptly adds, but that's him with his mom. And she was jealous of the affection that so many Hispanic men have with their mom. And I was thinking, I don't think that's a bad thing. I know plenty of people whose moms, like I didn't do laundry until I was 33 years old. My mom did it. My dad did. Everybody did my laundry but me. And then I was married, and my ex-wife did my laundry. So when I started doing laundry after I got divorced at 33 years old, I wasn't good at it. It never smelled as good as when my wife or my mom did it. I also didn't pay my own bills. Like I paid them, but I didn't write. I wouldn't write the checks or anything. I didn't read the mail. I didn't do any of that stuff. It just I worked. The money was in the bank, and somebody handled that for me. And so I had to learn how to do all these things when I was a newly divorced man. And some people look at that and say, "Oh my gosh, what bad home training." That was the custom. That's a cultural norm, if you will. Now maybe some Hispanics are going to call in now. I pay my own bills. My wife doesn't do that. But that was how it was for me. I didn't do any of that stuff. I didn't cook. I didn't do what I just said. I didn't do the checkbook balancing. I didn't do any of that. So my bottom line here is I think that affection for one's mother is a normal thing, and maybe it's more so in the Hispanic culture. I don't know, but I can tell you it's a very popular thing to have, for your mom to make you a plate. And the moral of my story here, where I'm going with this tangent, is that the comments in this Instagram meme were from, I don't know, there's like 1,000 of them, maybe 500 or 800. And many people were saying that this was called emotional incest. And I thought, that is some crazy stuff to say that because, some Hispanic moms are helicopter moms that like to do their laundry and take care of their baby boys into their 30s or forever, because I don't think moms really let go. How do you call that emotional incest? Like, I thought it was entirely inappropriate. And I was actually going to bring it up with our parent coach earlier, but I just felt like we ran out of time and I didn't have the time to do it. But it was interesting. And if anybody has an opinion on this, give me a call. But I just thought it was out of line. But again, I'm biased. I am a Hispanic man. I do love my mom. She's not with us anymore. But I love my mom to death. And she was, she did lots for me. She was always cooking. She was that kind of mom, like so many moms, right? I know that that's how that works. And, not every mom, but many. So I'm just, one more thing where people will label you something, whether it's Jason Aldean's song that needs to get canceled because he's nailing it and saying it like it is, or somebody's mom loving them and them loving their mom back and being called emotional incest. The whole thing is fake. It's phony. It's fraud, in my opinion, Matt. Anyway, they're telling me I got to take a break. I went too long. So thank you for your call, Matt. Eastern North Carolina, WTKF. I'm Rich Valdez, coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I tell you, there's a bunch of lefty weirdos out there that think that because a Hispanic woman might call her son papi or papito, papito lindo, or mi rey, my king, that this is somehow a replacement for her mate in life, calling this emotional incest. I think this is so off the deep end. And again, I'm just introducing this very briefly here. We're going to get into this. I'm going to find me a slew of experts to have conversations on this. I don't like it one bit. I think it's the wrong label, and it's totally misunderstood. So we'll get to that in a subsequent day. But there's a headline I'm going to tease because we can't dig into it too deeply. Hearing aids may cut the risk of cognitive decline by nearly half, meaning if your hearing's not well and you get a hearing aid, you might actually be helping yourself to prevent dementia. Interesting, right? And there's another dementia story. We're going to cover that one tomorrow, probably in hour number 3, or maybe towards the end of hour number 1 if I can get to it. But I just want to thank you guys for tonight. Despite our deep state trouble with the mic, we're back live on the air. And I also want to thank you for considering entering your email to vote for me on the People's Choice Podcast Award. We've been nominated. You can go to podcastawards.com, put in your email, and click that blue button to vote now. Anyway, hasta la próxima. That means until the next time, take care, good night, and God bless. I am Rich Valdez. We're going to do it together again tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked on this station. There's more to come.